The sky is still black when the shouting starts. At first it sounds distant, like wind rushing through a narrow pass, but then it grows sharper, closer, urgent. You feel the cold press of dawn against your skin as the ground trembles beneath running feet, and somewhere in the darkness a single voice cracks through the confusion. They're coming. Form ranks now. In that frozen moment between night and sunrise, 10,000 Greek soldiers, mercenaries, wanderers, veterans, farm boys, aristocrats, realize the truth. The great king of Persia has no intention of letting them go home alive. And so begins one of the most extraordinary survival marches in all of human history, a march that Xenophon himself, in his Anabasis, would describe as a journey through lands of enemies, mountains of fire, and seas without ships. The torchlight flickers along a ragged defensive line, as these Greeks, the remnants of Cyrus the Younger's doomed rebellion, tighten their grips on spear shafts slick with dew. Hours earlier, they believed negotiations might save them. After all, their commanders had dined with Tissaphernes, the Persian satrap who promised safe passage, but now whispers ripple through the ranks, whispers of betrayal, of generals lured into a tent under the guise of diplomacy, and of blades drawn before wine cups were even lowered. You hear men muttering the names of those taken, Clearchus, Proxenus, Agius, leaders who had marched with them from the coast of Ionia to the heart of Mesopotamia. Gone in a heartbeat. As historian Christopher Beckwith notes, the Persians understood perfectly that an army without its officers could be broken without a battle. And so the Greeks stand there in the half-light, surrounded, leaderless and deep within the empire they had just tried to overthrow. The horizon begins to glow a faint red, revealing a landscape that feels almost unreal in its enormity. To the west lies the Tigris River, shrouded in mist. To the east, the plains stretch endlessly toward Babylon. Somewhere beyond those plains waits the Persian army, a force far larger than anything the Greeks could hope to defeat. But retreating westward means crossing rivers patrolled by Persian boats. Retreating north means unknown tribes and mountains that scrape the sky, and retreating south is impossible, for south lies the heart of the empire, where death would come quickly and without witness. In this suspended moment, with fear pulsing like a second heartbeat, you see the young Athenian officer Xenophon, just 30 years old, fighting as a volunteer, not even a high-ranking commander, pacing through the campfires with a look of disbelief. He never intended to lead anyone. He simply sought adventure, glory, perhaps a measure of wealth. But as Plutarch later observed, history has a habit of choosing its own leaders. And on this dawn, as thousands of men stand poised on the edge of annihilation, it chooses Xenophon. He gathers a few trusted captains whispering urgently. They recount the satrap's treachery, the execution of their generals, the Persian forces tightening around them. Some argue for surrender. Some argue for a desperate last stand. But Xenophon insists on something else, something far more daring. "No one will save us," he says softly, "unless we save ourselves." Words hang in the air, fragile but electrifying. It's as if the entire army inhales at once. Around you, dawn finally breaks. The sun cuts across the plain in a single burning line, illuminating armor, helmets, and faces etched with exhaustion. These men have marched hundreds of miles already, through desert heat that split their lips open, through rivers that nearly swept them away, through lands where even friendly villages regarded them with suspicion. And now, they face the most impossible challenge yet, marching more than 1,000 miles through enemy territory while being hunted, starved, frozen, ambushed, betrayed, and tested beyond anything they imagined. Historian John Keegan once wrote that retreat is often more psychologically devastating than battle, for in retreat the enemy is everywhere and nowhere at once. The Greeks feel that truth now like a weight on their bones. A shout erupts near the center of the camp as Persian cavalry appear on a distant ridge, glittering like a strip of hammered bronze against the rising sun. Their standard bearers hold high the insignia of Tissaphernes. The message is unmistakable. The Greeks are surrounded. A cold silence settles over the mercenaries. They know Persian cavalry can outrun them, outmaneuver them, harass them for weeks without committing to a single decisive clash. And the Persians know that hunger, not steel, is often the true executioner of armies. Yet something unexpected happens. Instead of panic, the Greeks begin to move with quiet order. Shields are lifted, spears angled. The hoplite line rearranges itself with a calm that surprises even the Persians watching from afar. Xenophon steps onto a small mound of earth where the whole camp can see him. His voice is steady, carrying over the rasp of armor being strapped on. He reminds his companions of the battles they have already survived, the charge at Cunaxa where they had shattered Persian infantry despite being outnumbered, the long trek eastward where their discipline kept them alive, the Macedonian and Arcadian traditions carried in their blood. He speaks of home, not sentimentally, but as a destination worth earning through courage. The men listen in stillness. You feel the air shift around them, as if the weight of despair lifts just slightly. Even the veterans who once marched under Clearchus's iron discipline now nod in grim agreement. They may be trapped, but they are not broken. And they will not die here. The sun climbs higher. The Persians on the ridge hold their positions, watching, waiting. They expect the Greeks to attempt to surrender. Instead, the hoplites begin forming marching columns. Peltasts and archers spread to the flanks. Rear guards take shape. The entire force begins to pivot north, toward the distant mountains where freedom is only a faint possibility, but still a possibility. It is a direction the Persians did not anticipate. A direction filled with tribes who neither fear nor serve the great king. A direction where rivers cannot be easily sealed and cavalry cannot maneuver freely. And in that moment, as the Greeks begin their impossible march out of hell, the sun casts long shadows before them. Shadows that stretch across the dust like dark prophecies of what is to come. The first hours of the march feel strangely quiet. The Persians follow at a distance, their cavalry riding parallel to the Greek column like wolves shadowing a wounded stag. They don't attack, not yet. They want the Greeks to tire themselves, to wander into unfavorable ground, to lose cohesion. You can almost feel the eyes of Tissaphernes upon them from somewhere beyond the horizon, calculating, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Historian David Morgan once remarked that Persian satraps played war like a game of deliberate patience, allowing time itself to erode the resolve of those they hunted. The Greeks can sense that strategy unfolding around them like an invisible net. Dust rises from thousands of feet as the column snakes northward. Hoplites march in tight formation, shields slung over their backs, spears held upright like the masts of a drifting forest. The peltasts, lighter armed, take the outer edges of the formation, scanning the open plain for any sudden bursts of Persian cavalry. Xenophon moves constantly, sometimes marching with the rear guard, sometimes riding alongside the flanks, sometimes speaking quietly to men who show signs of fatigue or fear. He knows what the Persians are waiting for, the moment when exhaustion becomes despair, and he refuses to give it to them. The land begins to rise gently, and with elevation comes cold. Men pull their cloaks tighter, their breath forming thin white threads in the morning air. The terrain is shifting now. No longer the flat alluvial plains of Mesopotamia, but the broken foothills leading toward Armenia. Hills ripple across the horizon like the backs of sleeping giants, their shadows stretching across the earth. This is where the Persians will try to cut them off. Narrow passes, blind ridges, ravines where cavalry can trap them like fish in a net. You feel the tension tightening inside the column. Every bend in the terrain is a question, every ridge a threat. By noon, Persian horse archers begin their harassment. Their arrows fall like sudden rain, forcing the Greeks to halt and raise shields in a bristling wall of bronze. The sound is unmistakable, a rapid whirring followed by the sharp, insect-like impact of shafts biting into wood and metal. Men grit their teeth, holding formation while the archers ride in wide circles, release volleys, then fade away before any countercharge can reach them. This pattern repeats again and again. It wears on the nerves, it tests the discipline, but it does not break the line. Xenophon knows this cannot go on forever. He calls forward the peltasts, Thracians, Cretans, and other skirmishers who fight not with heavy armor, but with speed and precision. When the horse archers return for another volley, the Greek skirmishers explode outward in a sudden burst of aggression, sprinting in loose waves across the slopes. Their javelins whistle through the air, striking horses and riders with startling accuracy. The Persians recoil in confusion. They are not used to being hunted. For a moment, the persecution stops. A ripple of confidence moves through the Greek ranks as the skirmishers return, breathing hard but triumphant. Still, the Persians do not withdraw. They simply reposition farther along the column's projected route, waiting for the next opportunity. And as evening approaches, the wind begins to shift, carrying with it the first hints of winter. Xenophon consults with the remaining officers, men elected by the soldiers after their commanders were murdered. They decide to continue marching until darkness, hoping to put as much distance as possible between themselves and the plains where cavalry can maneuver freely. Torches are lit as shadows lengthen across the path. The light flickers across exhausted faces, illuminating sweat, dirt, and fear in equal measure. When the column finally stops to camp, tension lingers in the air like a low hum. Fires are lit but carefully, kept small to avoid revealing their exact numbers to Persian scouts. Men eat sparingly, barley, dried meat, whatever they have left. Many simply sit in silence, staring into the flames as if trying to draw strength from the embers. In moments like these, you can feel the psychological weight historian John Keegan described when he wrote, "An army on the run fights two enemies, the foe behind and the doubt within." For the Greeks, that doubt is real, heavy, and dangerous. Xenophon walks among the circles of men, speaking softly, deliberately. He reminds them that the Persians are strong when the land favors them, but vulnerable in the mountains. He reminds them that the further north they go, the more they enter lands where Persian authority weakens. And he reminds them, most importantly, that home lies beyond those mountains. You can see how his calm voice, his steady demeanor, begins to stitch the frayed nerves of the soldiers back together. Leadership here is not a rank but a presence, something Xenophon embodies without ever having sought it. That night, the Persians tested the camp's defenses. A sudden burst of arrows snaps through the dark like sparks hurled from a forge. Men instinctively reach for shields and crouch low. The campfires are quickly smothered, plunging everything into a tense half-light of moon and mist. Shadows move on the hills, indistinct, taunting. But the Greeks hold their ground. They form a defensive ring, shields overlapping, spears angled outward. Their discipline is a wall the darkness cannot breach. Eventually the Persians fade away again, unwilling to commit to a full assault in the dark. Sleep comes fitfully, broken by the cold and by the fear of what tomorrow may bring. And tomorrow brings the first major challenge of the march. At dawn, the Greeks reach the entrance to a narrow valley. High cliffs rise on both sides, jagged and imposing. Snow glitters on their upper slopes, a warning of the winter brutality ahead. But this valley is the only known route toward the northern highlands and the lands of the Karduchoi, a fierce mountain people whose relationship with Persia is hostile at best. It is dangerous ground, but it is freedom's direction. As the Greeks pause before entering, a murmur moves through the ranks, both awe and dread. This place feels like a threshold, a gateway between the world they know and a world that will test every ounce of their endurance. Xenophon studies the valley carefully, tracing the lines of potential ambush points with his eyes. He feels the weight of every life behind him, and knows that once they pass through this gorge, there is no turning back. And then, from somewhere behind them, the thundering echo of hooves, Persian cavalry closing in. There is no more time to deliberate, no more time to fear. The Greeks plunge into the valley as the Persians break into a gallop, beginning a deadly chase through the shadowed gorge where survival will depend not on strength, but on discipline, coordination, and the will to endure. The valley swallows the Greeks like a great stone throat. Steep walls rise on both sides, blotting out much of the sky and funneling the sounds of marching feet into a hollow, echoing rhythm. You feel the air grow colder immediately. Shadows cling to the rock faces, and icy patches crackle beneath their sandals. Behind them, the first wave of Persian cavalry surges into view, their armor catching the light like the scales of some relentless predator. The clatter of hooves ricochets off the cliffs, creating the eerie sensation of multiple armies closing in. The Greeks tighten formation instinctively. Heavy hoplites move toward the center, lighter troops toward the edges where they can climb or maneuver more quickly. Xenophon rides along the column's flank, urging speed but caution, reminding officers to keep their men close and coordinated. The Persians can't charge properly in this confined space, but they can rain arrows down from horseback, and soon the whirring hiss of their bowstrings fills the air. Arrows streak overhead, some shattering on rock, others striking shields with dull thuds that reverberate through wooden cores and into the bones of the men holding them. The column keeps moving. It must. Stopping means being pinned inside this gorge with nowhere to scatter, nowhere to form defensive depth. The hoplites endure the arrow rain with clenched jaws, heads lowered, shields angled. The peltasts return fire with what javelins they can, though most clatter uselessly against distant stone. The clash of projectiles creates a strange music, metal ringing on rock, wood splintering, men shouting warnings as shafts skim past their faces. Ahead, the valley narrows further. The Persians see it too. Horse archers race along the slopes, trying to get ahead of the column, to trap them inside this natural killing ground. Xenophon spots the maneuver instantly. He orders the fastest peltasts to sprint ahead, scale the rocks and hold the choke point until the hoplites can catch up. You can almost feel the urgency rolling off him, a man who understands that one delay, one moment of hesitation, could mean annihilation. The peltasts scramble upward with fingers clutching jagged stone, pebbles cascade underfoot as they climb, their silhouettes rise against the pale winter sky before they disappear over a ridge. Moments later, the sharp cry of combat rings out from above. The Persians have reached the narrow pass first. Now it has become a desperate race. Below, the hoplite line increases pace, boots pounding the frozen earth. Shields bump against each other. Breath steams into the cold air. The sound of the cavalry behind grows louder, as if the very walls of the gorge are shaking. Yet the Greeks push forward, driven by something deeper than fear, driven by the knowledge that if they break through this valley, they slip beyond the reach of Persia's greatest weapon, massed cavalry. As the front ranks near the choke point, they see the peltasts locked in vicious struggle on the narrow shelf. Persian riders have dismounted to fight on foot, their curved sabers flashing in tight quarters. The peltasts, with their lack of armor, rely on agility, leaping, dodging, thrusting with short spears. Blood stains the rocks. Voices echo in the confined space, distorted, ghost-like. Then the hoplites arrive. Bronze crashes against leather and iron as the heavy infantry thrust upward into the fray. The sheer weight of their advance pushes the Persians back in shock. The narrowness of the pass prevents the cavalry from reinforcing their infantry, forcing them to fight at a disadvantage. Step by step, the Greeks force a breakthrough. Bodies slip and fall down the rocky slope. The Persians retreat just far enough to remount before retreating to higher ground. The valley opens into a wider basin, still flanked by cliffs, but spacious enough for the Greeks to finally stop, regroup, and breathe. The moment they do, exhaustion sweeps over them like a crashing wave. Men collapse to sit on cold stones, chests heaving. Some tear arrows from their shields. Others check wounds, shallow cuts, bruises, bleeding shoulders. A few cough blood into the snow. But this reprieve is brief. Far above, Persian scouts gather on the ridge, signaling with flags. They're not done. They know exactly where the Greeks are heading. The northern highlands are the domain of the Karduchoi, a mountain people who despise foreign armies crossing their lands. Xenophon knows the writings of Herodotus, who described these tribes as fierce, a law unto themselves, and hostile to all invaders. If the Persians can't destroy the Greeks outright, they can at least drive them into another enemy's arms. And so, as dusk stains the sky with streaks of deep purple, the Greeks leave the valley and enter the rugged highlands. Lands choked with forests, sheer drops and paths so narrow they seem carved by the wind rather than by human hands. The cold intensifies. Breath fogs violently in the air. Snow begins to fall in scattered flakes, drifting across the path like pale ash. That night, the Greeks camp among jagged rocks and wind-worn pines. Fires burn low, fueled by scavenged branches. The men eat little. The terrain has transformed into a realm where food is scarce, rivers freeze solid overnight, and every ridge could be hiding a tribe of mountain warriors. Yet for the first time the Persians do not attack. Their cavalry cannot fight here. The terrain is too steep, too unpredictable. They retreat, leaving the Greeks to face an even more unpredictable threat. In the middle of the night, distant horns sound from the northern slopes, not Persian horns. These are deeper, more primal. The Karduchoi are watching. Xenophon wakes instantly. Scouts rush in to report movement on the ridges, shadows slipping between trees, glints of metal or stone weapons. The Greeks know nothing about these people except what rumor provides, and rumor paints them as hunters who strike without warning and vanish into the mountains like smoke. Every Greek in the camp feels the same instinctive tension, the sense of being observed by something unseen. As dawn breaks, more snow begins to fall, coating the ground in a thin white crust. The Greeks tighten their cloaks and prepare to march. The mountains loom ahead, towering silhouettes of stone and ice. Somewhere beyond them lies the Black Sea and the Greek colonies that can send ships home. But between here and there, the army must cross days of hostile territory while being stalked by warriors who know every cliff, every ledge, every hidden ravine. And for the first time since the death of their generals, the men feel fear not of Persia, but of a new enemy entirely, one whose land they have trespassed upon and who will not welcome them. Xenophon looks northward, snow swirling around him, and whispers to the officers beside him, "This will be the hardest part." He does not yet know how right he is. The mountains rise like a wall of ancient stone teeth, jagged and silent beneath the drifting snow. As morning settles over the highlands, the Greeks begin their ascent into territory ruled not by kings or empires, but by the unforgiving wild and those hardened enough to dwell within it. Their breath fogs the air as they trudge upward, boots slipping on ice-crusted paths no wider than a man's shoulders. Below them, ravines plunge into white oblivion. Above them, dark pines sway in the frozen wind, their branches heavy with snow that falls in sudden cascades. The Karduchoi appear first as faint silhouettes on the ridges, silent watchers against a grey sky. They do not approach, they do not signal. They simply observe their presence like the pressure of unseen fingers on the Greek spines. Historian Peter Green once wrote that mountain tribes fought wars of patience, letting the land speak first, and letting fear do the early killing. The Greeks sense truth at every careful step. Xenophon orders the army into a tighter formation. Hoplites move nearer the center of the column, where the narrow trails offer some protection from ambush. Light troops ascend the outer edges, eyes scanning the cliffs for sudden movement. The cold gnaws through cloaks and armor alike. Men wrap cloth around their hands to keep fingers from stiffening around spear shafts. Hunger presses more harshly now, supplies are dwindling, and there is little in these mountains to forage. By midday, the first attack comes. A sharp whistle cuts through the wind, followed by the thudding crash of stones tumbling down the slope. Boulders smash into the path, sending men scattering against the cliff face. Shouts erupt. Warnings, curses, cries for help. Up on the ridge, Karduchoi warriors reveal themselves, silhouettes dark and swift as they push more rocks loose. Their tactics are brutally simple. Use the mountains as weapons. Xenophon reacts instantly. He orders the slingers forward, Cretans renowned for their accuracy even at steep angles. Their lead bullets whistle upward, bouncing off stone, forcing the mountain warriors to lie flat or retreat behind thicker cover. The bombardment slows but does not stop entirely. The Greeks must move now quickly before the path becomes completely blocked. They begin a grueling advance up the slope. Every few steps another rock crashes near the formation. Dust clouds rise, the narrow path groans under the weight of men scrambling upward. The hoplites push forward with shields raised overhead, forming makeshift roofs against the hail of stones and javelins. It is not elegant warfare, it is survival, inch by inch. The Karduchoi melt away each time the Greeks get close, reappearing farther up the ridge to repeat the attack. Their movements are ghost-like, bare feet gripping icy stone, cloaks blending into the grey-green forest. They know every crevice, every slope, every echo of this mountain world. In contrast, the Greeks move as strangers, foreign bodies in a land that rejects them. By late afternoon, the army reaches a shallow plateau, exhausted and bruised. Men fall to snow, panting. Some bleed from scalp wounds where stones grazed them, others cradle broken fingers or battered shields. Xenophon moves among them, offering quiet encouragement. He does not dramatize the danger. He speaks plainly. Every mountain has two sides. If we endure this one, we will descend the next. A small spark of morale rekindles. The Greeks construct a defensive ring of shields and light barricades, fallen logs, stones, anything that can slow a sudden night assault. Fires are lit cautiously, their glow flickering against the darkening mountainsides. Snow continues to fall, muffling sound and softening edges. The men share what food remains, mostly barley soaked in hot water, stretched thin among thousands. Hunger claws at them, but they know worse awaits if they falter. As night deepens, shapes move along the ridges again. The Karduchoi tested the camp with probing attacks, arrows loosed from the dark, stones pushed silently downhill. Each time, Greek sentries brace, shields raised, torches lifted. The tension is suffocating. Sleep comes in fragments, broken by sudden rustles or distant horn calls echoing across the peaks. Just before dawn, a piercing cry splits the air. A group of Karduchoi warriors rushes the outer rim of the camp, hoping to catch the Greeks disorganized. But the hoplites respond with ruthless precision. Shields lock. Spears thrust. The Karduchoi fall back almost immediately, unwilling to fight a pitched battle. They vanish into the forest as quickly as they appeared. When daylight returns, it brings no comfort, only the bleak truth that the Greeks must climb even higher. Their path now winds into a realm of pure winter. Snow lies thick on the slopes. Ice glitters like glass along the rocks. Visibility narrows to a world of white and grey. The air burns the lungs. As they ascend, the Karduchoi strike again, this time more directly. Warriors armed with long spears and crescent-shaped shields appear on a ridge overlooking the trail, blocking the route forward. Others climb behind the Greeks, threatening to surround the entire column. It is the deadliest moment yet. One mistake, one break in formation, and the army could be crushed from both sides. Xenophon sees the danger instantly. He calls for the youngest and strongest soldiers to seize the heights before the enemy forms a complete encirclement. Armed with light shields and spears, these men scramble up the steep slope, grabbing roots, rocks, patches of ice, anything that holds. The Karduchoi race to intercept them, hurling javelins downward. Snow erupts around climbers at every impact. But the Greeks keep going. One reaches the ridge, then another, then a dozen more. They crash into the Karduchoi with a fury born of desperation. The narrow ridge becomes a frenzy of close fighting. Boots slipping, snow spraying, men wrestling on the edge of a sheer drop. Spears break, shields crack. Voices shout in languages neither side understands. Finally, the Karduchoi withdrew. Not defeated, but outmaneuvered. The path ahead is theirs. By sunset, the Greeks cross the highest pass and descend into a deep ravine where the wind is mercifully calmer. For the first time in days, the sounds of pursuit fade behind them. Snow still falls, but lightly now, like drifting ash. The mountains look softer, less hostile, as if acknowledging that the Greeks have earned their passage. But the march is far from over. Ahead lies not freedom, but more days of starvation, freezing nights, river crossings, and the final bitter sprint toward the Black Sea. Yet as the men gather around small fires, warming their trembling hands, a quiet hope takes root. They have survived Persia, they have survived the mountains. And in the distance, though faint and unreal, you almost feel it. A whisper carried on the wind. The sea. The sea is waiting. The descent from the mountains begins with silence, the kind of silence that feels heavy, as if the air itself is listening. Snow still clings to the ridges above, but down here in the ravine the world softens just slightly. Meltwater trickles over stones. Pines spread their branches in dark, watchful rows. The Greeks move carefully, their legs trembling from days of climbing, their hands raw from gripping frozen rock. But for the first time in weeks, the terrain seems to be guiding them rather than pushing them back. Still, food is nearly gone. Hunger stalks the column like a spectre. Men walk with hollow faces, their steps slower, their shields heavier. Every so often someone stumbles from dizziness. The cold bites harder where their armor has rubbed the skin raw. But they move on, driven by a faint, fragile hope. Because beyond these valleys lies the land of the Karduchoi, a people who live closer to the Black Sea. If the Greeks can reach their villages, they might find grain, animals, something, anything to keep the army alive. As they press forward, signs of habitation appear, wood smoke twisting above distant trees, faint impressions of paths worn by shepherds, abandoned huts with cracked clay hearths. But the Karduchoi do not welcome strangers. When the Greeks approach the first settlement, defenders rise from behind wooden palisades, lean, weather-worn men armed with slings and spears. They shout warnings in their own tongue and hurl stones with stunning force. The Greeks try to signal peace, lifting empty hands. The mountain tribes have heard rumors of the intruders who fought the Karduchoi. They see only danger. Xenophon wastes no time. He orders the light troops to circle around and find an unguarded path into the village. Their goal is not slaughter, only survival. The peltasts and slingers sneak through a narrow goat trail, climbing down the backside of the settlement's hill. Moments later, the defenders realize too late that they are surrounded. The Greeks break through the palisade with shields raised. A brief, chaotic struggle ensues, shouts, splintering wood, frantic scrambling, but soon the Karduchoi scatter into the forest, abandoning huts and granaries. The Greeks pour into the village, the sight of grain sacks almost bringing some to tears. Fires are quickly lit, flour is turned into coarse bread, sheep are slaughtered for meat. For the first time in weeks, the men eat until the gnawing pain inside them loosens. Some sit in stunned silence, clutching warm bowls of broth as if afraid the moment is a dream. Others laugh weakly, their voices cracking. A few weep openly. Survival, as historian John Keegan observed, is often felt most sharply not in moments of triumph, but in moments of relief. After 2 days of rest and resupply, the Greeks march again. Stronger now, steadier, though the weight of the journey still clings to them. Their path dips through rolling hills and narrow gorges, then rises again into broadened highlands where the cold wind carries the scent of distant water. They do not know it yet, but the Black Sea lies only days ahead. Yet, their trials are not over. As they leave the Karduchoi lands, they encounter another tribe, the Chalybes, renowned for their ironworking and their fierce territorial pride. These people do not fear foreigners. When the Greeks approach their borders, Chalybes warriors form a line across the path, shields of wood and rawhide gleaming with frost, axes resting on their shoulders. Their silence is unsettling. These are not scattered mountain hunters, these are disciplined fighters. The clash is brutal. The Chalybes fight with a ferocity the Greeks have not seen before, darting in with quick chopping strikes, then retreating behind shields with uncanny coordination. Their axes bite into hoplite shields, splintering the wood. Greek spears thrust forward, some finding flesh, others glancing off thick leather armor. The Chalybes answer with shield bashes that knock men sprawling into the snow. The battle turns only when Xenophon orders the peltasts to flank the Chalybes, circling through the trees to hit them from behind. Even then, the mountain warriors do not break. They simply withdraw step by step, maintaining their formation until they vanish into the forest like smoke dissolving in wind. The Greeks do not pursue, they can't afford to, but they know this encounter has bought them something invaluable: space. The Chalybes will not attack again quickly. They respect strength. With this final obstacle passed, the landscape begins to shift. The mountains recede into softer hills, the snow thins, the air grows damp, birds wheel overhead, seabirds. Their cries echo across the sky with a sound that pricks every Greek heart awake. The men lift their heads, feeling something electric beneath their ribs. And then, one morning, after days of marching through pine forests and damp meadows, they crest a final ridge. What they see steals the breath from thousands of throats at once. A vast, shimmering expanse of blue stretches across the horizon, glinting beneath the winter sun. The Black Sea, the Euxine, the threshold of home. And on its distant curve, faint but unmistakable, the whitewashed roofs of a Greek colony, Trapezus. For a heartbeat, no one speaks. Then a single voice rises, half scream, half sob. The sea, the sea. It ripples through the ranks like lightning. Men drop their shields and run, others fall to their knees, arms raised toward the sky. Veterans who have not cried since childhood weep openly. Xenophon stands still, watching his comrades surge forward. His eyes reflect a quiet, exhausted joy. This moment, Thalata, Thalata, will echo through history as one of the most powerful cries of human endurance ever recorded. As Xenophon later wrote, "No sight was ever more sweet." The Greeks descend the final slope with renewed strength. Trapezus opens its gates to them, astonished at the arrival of 10,000 men who have crossed empires, mountains, rivers, and death itself. The people welcome them with food, shelter, and the first true safety they have known since the betrayal in Persia. From here, the army will split, regroup, and seek passage home by ship. Some return to Athens, others wander to Thrace or Crete or Asia Minor. Xenophon himself will continue toward the Black Sea colonies, eventually settling in Scyllus and writing the Anabasis, preserving the memory of this march so that even centuries later, historians like Plutarch, Hugh Kennedy, and Peter Green could study the extraordinary resilience of men who refused to die in foreign lands. But the essence of the story does not belong to one man. It belongs to all of them. The hoplites, the peltasts, the slingers, the officers elected by their peers, the nameless boys who became warriors, the veterans who became leaders, the wounded who kept marching even when blood soaked the snow behind them. It belongs to an army that walked more than 1,000 miles through enemy territory and lived. And long after they reached the sea, the echo of their cry still drifted across the mountains and valleys they conquered with nothing but discipline, courage, and an unbreakable desire to see home again. The sea.